Well, Anthony Albanese has officially been sworn in as the country's 31st Prime Minister this morning after Australians took to the polls over the weekend. The first time a Labor government has been elected in almost a decade, ousting Scott Morrison's coalition from power.
We saw both the incoming and outgoing leaders speak to the nation. So did what they say match what their bodies were doing? And our winners truly grinners. Here for her take on all the latest is communications and body language expert, Dr. Louise Mahler. Lovely to see you, Louise, again.
Lovely to see you, Larry. Kylie.
Let's start with the new Prime Minister swearing in this morning.
Yep.
What did you take away from that?
Well, I take away, thank God it's all over. We can relax. What I took away was it was a beautiful ceremony, and I guess I'm always looking for little body language things, and what I picked up was that Mr Albanese grabbed for his jacket when he stood up, then grabbed again when he sat down, then sat down, grabbed again, which is what Scott Morrison used to do. It's a little tell of stress. Often people bring their jacket across, but he behaved beautifully, got behind the lectern, took his rest position, and it was delightful.
OK, very prime ministerial.
Very prime ministerial.
24 hours into the job.
Yeah.
Penny Wong looked actually quite emotional too. She did.
She's the first person to have a position who was born outside Australia.
Yeah, I thought she looked very emotional. Let's go back to election night. It was a more emotional side we saw during Mr Albanese's victory speech. What was his body language saying? I thought his speech was exceptional. What was his body language saying?
Yeah, it was fabulous. The whole thing was fabulous. But I have to say, I was worried. I was worried when he came out of the House and he was looking very serious. I was worried when Penny Wong came on first, and I thought, is he emotional? Is she covering for him? But then he came out and he was emotional. And I don't know about you, but I'm fully indoctrinated. I can see his mother there watching him, and I can see and feel him. And of course, he became emotional and the edges of his mouth went, his chin went. But interestingly, people said he choked up. He did not choke up. His throat remained clear and he spoke clearly. And the outstanding things were that the tail of this lazy did not exist. The mouth worked clearly. The tongue worked clearly. And it was like, and he stood up strong and found his power. He didn't lean forward or do any of those things people do. He found his real power. And it was like a Tinkerbell and the fairies when they say the girls and boys clap their hands to show you believe in fairies, and Tinkerbell comes back to life. Well, I felt very much he had the power of the people within him.
All right. Now, let's talk about Scott Morrison, right, who seemed quite tense during his, when he was conceding defeat. What did you take away from that? What did you think of that?
Yeah, well, what do we all do when we're under stress? We get tight, and as a consequence, he seemed to yell and he seemed to spit his words. He was spitting his words out. And interestingly enough, he spoke about people are looking for certainty, and people are looking for certainty, but I don't think that was the key demise. The key demise was warmth and empathy, and it's something that perhaps has been a challenge for him throughout.
You can understand being 10. I mean, he just lost the election.
You bet.
Yeah.
Devastated.
Now, who could be replacing Morrison as Liberal leader? Pete Dutton seems to be one of the front runners. What do we read from Mr Dutton's body language?
Yes, well, I don't talk about politics, I talk about their bodies. Yes. And if Mr Dutton is the answer, you're asking the wrong question. So I think that Mr Dutton would make a fabulous Queensland detective. So he has that look in terms of charisma where he just goes blank. Right. Like that when he's answering questions, and it's sort of like, were you driving the car when you hit the pedestrian? You know, he gives nothing away, and I honestly think it's time. Read the music. The music says, get a woman, get empathy. You know, if he's the answer, wrong question.
OK, now, other names we're hearing, options are Dan Tehan and Karen Andrews, based on their body language. Who do you think would be, is the better public speaker, the more confident performer?
Yeah, look, I don't know them well, but Dan Tehan seems to present very well on TV, as does she. But there's a thing called a power strategy. It's what you do when you get under stress. And watching Dan under stress, he would become aggressive, and he did gestures like this, grabbing his fingers and doing that. That's not going to work. And what she does, what Katie does, is, of course, she speaks very slowly, in a considered way, with crisp enunciation. And I think that would drive the public crazy after a while, but, you know, they're all great people.
Well, let's hope their minders are watching you and then they can get to that. Before you go, Josh Frydenberg, a softer side after the loss?
I thought we saw 3 Josh Frydenbergs over the weekend. One was Josh Frydenberg, who was with his wife and family, and suddenly he spoke like I've never heard him before. There was a softness and love in his voice, and he spoke and he smiled genuinely. And then he began to speak about politics, and suddenly the voice went back to this. He put on his political voice, and there was like 2 Joshes there on screen. And then Sunday morning, we saw a very, very upset Josh Frydenberg who could barely speak with the emotion, speaking like that. And I thought, wow, 3 Josh Frydenbergs in one weekend.
It's a roller coaster, isn't it? It's a roller coaster. Larry doesn't know what to say.
I feel like I'm watching an episode of Kath and Kim when you're talking. It's unreal. Lovely to see you, Louise, as always.
Thank you, Louise, for your take on what was a big election weekend.
Absolutely.